Story number 1. The Vanishing Passenger of Deck 9. There's a saying among cruise ship workers that goes, "The ocean never gives back what it takes." For most people, it's just a superstition, a chilling phrase meant to keep passengers respectful of the sea. But for the crew of the Ocean Serenity in the summer of 2012, that phrase became a terrifying truth. The Ocean Serenity was a luxury cruise liner owned by Blue Horizon Cruises, departing from Miami on July 6th for a 7-day voyage through the Caribbean. It carried nearly 4,000 passengers, families, honeymooners, retirees, and one woman named Emily Carter, a 32-year-old travel blogger from Portland, Oregon. Emily wasn't your typical tourist. She ran a blog called Wander Unseen, where she explored the darker side of popular destinations, abandoned hotels, ghost towns, and real-life mysteries. Her next story was supposed to be about what really happens behind the scenes on modern cruise ships. Sadly, she never got the chance to finish it. According to her sister, Emily sent her last email at around 1:47 a.m. on the third night of the trip. The message was short, but strange. "Something's wrong here. The crew keeps changing stories about a man who went missing last week. I swear I saw him tonight, standing outside cabin 9341. Her sister thought Emily was just overtired. But the next morning, Emily didn't show up for breakfast. When her cabin steward tried to check on her, there was no response. After several unanswered knocks, he opened the door with a master key. The cabin looked normal, except for one unsettling detail. The balcony door was wide open, the sea wind blowing through, and Emily's phone was still recording on the desk. That recording became the central piece of evidence in the investigation. The audio begins with the faint sound of waves and the deep hum of the ship's engines. Emily's whisper can be heard saying, "Someone's outside again. Same knock, same 3 taps." Then, 3 slow knocks echo against the cabin door. After a brief silence, a man's voice, low and distant, says, "You shouldn't have looked for me." What follows is chaos, a scuffle, the balcony door sliding open, and the sound of something heavy hitting the railing before the microphone fills with rushing wind. The last thing recorded before the file ends is a faint splash and the ocean's endless roar. The timestamp reads 2:03 a.m. When the Ocean Serenity docked in San Juan 2 days later, local authorities boarded the ship for questioning. The cruise line officially reported that Emily had fallen overboard under unknown circumstances, but passengers gave a very different account. Several claimed they saw a tall man in an officer's uniform standing near Emily's cabin around the same time she disappeared. One couple even insisted they saw him enter her hallway. But when investigators reviewed the ship's security footage, the segment covering that time period was gone. According to the chief of security, a hardware malfunction wiped 6 hours of footage, from midnight to 6 in the morning, the exact window when Emily vanished. Things only got stranger. When investigators checked the crew manifest, no one matching the officer's description existed. There was no record of anyone assigned to that section of Deck 9 at that time. Yet multiple witnesses had seen him. Some even described a name tag, though no one could remember what it said, only that the letters looked old, faded, as if from a different uniform altogether. After the investigation, the cruise company quietly sealed off cabin 9341 for maintenance. It was never offered to passengers again, but crew members still talked about it. Housekeepers said they heard footsteps pacing inside at night, even when the cabin was locked and empty. One new steward quit after just 3 days on board, claiming he heard a woman's voice whisper behind him while cleaning the hallway, "Don't look over the rail." Years later, when a former employee was interviewed anonymously for a maritime podcast, he revealed something chilling. He said that a few years before Emily's disappearance, a male passenger had gone missing from the very same cabin. The incident had been quietly covered up to avoid bad press. That man was never found. His name? Daniel Reeves, a deck officer who went off duty one night and was never seen again. To this day, the Ocean Serenity still sails under a different name, and cabin 9341 remains permanently locked. The cruise line denies any connection between the disappearances, calling it all rumor and coincidence. But among crew members, one belief remains, that when the ship sails through calm waters late at night, a faint knocking can still be heard echoing from behind that sealed cabin door. 3 slow, deliberate taps, as if someone or something is still trying to come back aboard.
Story number 2. The Forgotten Voyage of the SS Andromeda. There are hundreds of stories buried beneath the surface of the Atlantic, but one in particular remains shrouded in mystery: the disappearance of the SS Andromeda. Official records describe it as a maritime accident that occurred in 1988, a ship lost in a sudden storm. But those who have studied the case closely, those who have listened to the recovered tapes and interviewed the families of the missing, know there was no storm that night. What really happened aboard the SS Andromeda has never been fully explained, and maybe it never can be. The Andromeda wasn't always a cruise ship. It began its life as a British naval transport vessel during World War II, originally named the HMS Arden. After the war, it was sold to a private company, refitted, and turned into a luxury liner. By 1988, it had been acquired by Northern Star Cruises, a small company that specialized in heritage voyages. The Andromeda's first official trip under their ownership was meant to be something special, a nostalgic cruise recreating the golden age of ocean travel. The ship's itinerary included Halifax, Greenland, and Iceland. It promised a journey through time, elegant dining, and live classical music under the stars. What it delivered, instead, was one of the chilling mysteries in maritime history. The ship left Halifax on June 14th with roughly 1,200 passengers and crew. Among them was a Canadian journalist named Mark Livingston, who had been invited to document the voyage. Mark was known for his fascination with lost ships and oceanic myths. He brought with him a small tape recorder, using it to capture his daily observations. The first few entries were calm, almost cheerful. He talked about the decor, brass railings, dark mahogany furniture, and the smell of salt that seemed to cling to every corridor. He mentioned the passengers, too, mostly older couples, some families, a few history enthusiasts. Everything felt peaceful, until the third night. Mark's entry for June 17th was the first sign that something was wrong. He said, "The ship feels uneasy tonight," softly into his recorder. The hulls groan, like they're moving from inside. Some passengers swear they've seen people who aren't there. A woman claimed she saw a man in an old naval uniform staring at her from the upper deck. The crew told her she was imagining things, but I saw the look in her eyes. She wasn't lying. That night, the ship's radar began flickering. Static bursts, false readings, and then complete darkness for several minutes. The weather reports from the mainland showed no storms within hundreds of miles, yet the crew claimed they were entering heavy seas. At dawn, the first body was found. A passenger named Harold Pierce, a retired engineer, was discovered near the boiler room. The official cause was listed as a heart attack, but according to one of the ship's nurses, his hands were covered in burns, as if he'd touched something hot, and his body was damp with seawater, despite being far above the lower decks. The captain told the passengers it was a tragic medical emergency. The truth was quietly buried, just like Harold would soon be. By the fourth night, panic began spreading. Mark's tapes captured it vividly. He whispered, "It's after midnight. The lights keep flickering. I heard alarms earlier, but the crew told us to stay inside. Someone's crying in the hallway. I tried to call the bridge. No answer. The engines sound wrong. They keep cutting in and out like someone's tampering with them." Then came a metallic groan in the background, followed by a whisper that the investigators would replay countless times later. "We never left." It was faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. Hours later, at 5:47 a.m. on June 18th, a faint distress signal reached the Coast Guard. The message was broken, interrupted by static, but one phrase came through clearly. "Turn back. It's not us." The transmission was traced to the Andromeda's coordinates, somewhere north of the Atlantic Ridge. A rescue team was dispatched immediately, but by the time they reached the area 12 hours later, the sea was calm and empty. There was no wreckage, no oil slick, no trace of lifeboats, nothing. It was as if the ship had vanished into thin air.
3 days later, a single lifeboat was found drifting more than 40 miles off the recorded route. Inside were 2 items, a corroded typewriter and one of Mark Livingston's audio tapes labeled Deck B, June 18. The tape was badly damaged, but restoration teams managed to recover parts of it. What they heard was chilling. The first few seconds contained the sound of sirens, metal scraping, and rushing water. Then, in the background, came a rhythmic chant, low male voices repeating something that no language expert could identify. As the tape continued, the chanting grew louder, until a woman screamed, "They're in the walls!" and the audio abruptly cut to static. The official investigation concluded that the ship likely suffered an engine explosion and sank rapidly, but no wreckage was ever found to support that theory. The families of the missing were offered settlements and told to move on. The company, Northern Star Cruises, quietly went bankrupt within a year, and the Andromeda became another name in the long list of maritime disappearances. For nearly 4 years, the story remained a legend. Then, in 1992, something impossible happened. A Norwegian fishing trawler called the Helga Star reported seeing a massive rusted ship drifting aimlessly about 200 miles south of Greenland. According to their log, the vessel had no lights, no radio signals, and no visible crew. The fishermen claimed the name on the hull was barely legible, but one word could still be made out through the corrosion – Andromeda. When they tried to approach, their instruments went haywire. Compass needles spun and radio frequencies filled with static. Within minutes, a thick fog rolled in and the ship disappeared from both sight and radar. One fisherman swore that before it vanished, he saw a figure standing on the upper deck, a pale woman with dark hair wearing an outdated life jacket, staring directly at them. In 2003, a deep-sea exploration team discovered fragments of a steel hull at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, 600 miles east of Newfoundland. Serial markings matched those of the SS Andromeda. Inside the wreckage, they recovered a sealed, waterproof container. Inside were crew logs, a few film reels, and a partially functional camera. When the footage was restored, the scenes were deeply unsettling. Empty hallways swaying with the current, tables still set for dinner, a grand piano floating sideways in what used to be the ballroom. But the most disturbing image appeared near the end of one reel, a reflection in a broken mirror showing several figures standing behind the cameraman, motionless, pale,
and watching. The footage ended with the camera dropping to the ground and a distorted whisper, "We never left." The recovered crew logs revealed even more disturbing details. The final entry, written by the first officer, read, "The captain is gone. He went below deck after hearing a knocking sound. The walls are wet. The ship isn't sinking. It's breathing." Experts dismissed the logs as the ramblings of desperate men. But for those who have studied the Andromeda case, there's one final piece of evidence that still haunts them. In 2005, the Maritime Archive in London received an unmarked package containing a reel-to-reel tape. The postmark indicated it had been sent from Reykjavik, the Andromeda's intended destination. On the tape, a man's voice speaks quietly over the hiss of old static. It's Mark Livingston. "If anyone hears this, don't look for us. The ship isn't lost. It's trapped somewhere between where the ocean ends and something else begins." Then the tape cuts to silence, followed by the faint sound of water dripping. To this day, no one knows how that recording surfaced or who sent it. The Andromeda's wreckage has remained sealed off to the public, and no official expeditions are allowed near the site. Fishermen who pass through the area often report strange radio interference, brief fragments of Morse code, and distorted human voices repeating the same words over and over. "We never left." Whether the SS Andromeda sank in a mechanical disaster or was taken by something beyond explanation, one thing is certain: it remains a ghost ship, eternally adrift in the dark waters of the North Atlantic, carrying with it 1,200 souls who vanished into nothing, yet somehow are still out there, whispering through the static.
Story number 3. The Last Broadcast from the Northern Star. Every year, thousands of cruise ships cross the North Atlantic without incident. But in the winter of 1999, one voyage ended so strangely that even the most rational investigators refused to talk about it publicly. The ship's name was the Northern Star, a mid-sized luxury cruise liner that sailed out of Southampton, England, bound for New York City. It was supposed to be a 10-day winter voyage filled with live music, fine dining, and holiday festivities. Instead, it became a chilling legend. The story of a ship that kept sending distress signals for days after it had already disappeared beneath the ocean. The Northern Star departed on December 3, 1999, carrying around 2,000 passengers and over 600 crew members. The ship was one of the newest in its class, known for its cutting-edge communication systems and advanced navigation controls. It was considered unsinkable, a term the shipbuilders had haunted since the Titanic, and one they would soon regret using again. For the first few days, everything went smoothly. The passengers enjoyed calm seas and winter-themed events. But by the 5th night, something changed. According to later testimony from radio operators along the East Coast, faint distress signals began to appear around 1 a.m. on December 8th. The messages came from the Northern Star's registered frequency, yet they didn't match any distress code used by the crew. Instead of the standard SOS, operators reported hearing a man's voice whispering over the static. "We can't see the sky. The ship is surrounded." When authorities tried to respond, there was no acknowledgement, just dead air. At first, the Coast Guard assumed it was interference or a prank, but as the night went on, more signals came in, some from different stations, all repeating fragments of the same message. "We are not moving. The lights are gone. The captain is dead." The signals were traced to a position roughly 200 miles off Newfoundland. When rescue vessels were sent to investigate the next morning, they found nothing but calm sea. There was no wreckage, no lifeboats, not even an oil slick.
It was as if the Northern Star had vanished overnight. The families of the passengers demanded answers. For weeks, investigators searched the area. Nothing surfaced. Until January 6, 2000, when a frozen lifeboat was discovered drifting near the coast of Nova Scotia. Inside were 2 bodies, both badly decomposed, their skin pale and swollen. One of them was identified as the ship's communications officer, David Linton, age 31. His body was found clutching a waterproof emergency radio, the same model used aboard the Northern Star. The battery was drained, but the tape inside contained a partial recording of the ship's final broadcast. When the audio was cleaned and restored by the Coast Guard, it revealed something that horrified even the most seasoned investigators. The first half was static, bursts of wind, crashing waves, and what sounded like heavy footsteps on metal floors. Then came Linton's voice, trembling and desperate. "If anyone hears this, we've lost power. The ocean, it's not behaving right. It's calm, but the ship's moving like something's underneath us. The captain's gone. He went below deck after hearing knocking from the hull. No one's seen him since. I think something's trying to come in through the winds." The next few seconds were filled with metallic groaning and the sound of distant screaming. Then a whisper, faint, echoing, a woman's voice saying, "Don't let them see the sky." The tape ended there. When this audio was played publicly during a press briefing, parts of it were redacted. Authorities described it as an example of crew panic under duress. But independent audio experts noted something chilling. The frequency of the whisper didn't match human vocal range. It was lower, almost infrasound, the kind of sound that creates nausea, dizziness, and hallucinations. To make things even stranger, radar logs from nearby vessels recorded a brief electromagnetic disturbance on the same night the Northern Star disappeared. For a period of exactly 6 minutes, all instruments in a 50-mile radius malfunctioned. Compasses spun uncontrollably and depth sensors froze. When the readings returned to normal, the Northern Star's transponder signal was gone. Over the next few weeks, fishermen from the Labrador coast reported seeing a massive ship drifting silently in the fog, its lights dim and flickering. Every sighting described the same detail. The ship seemed completely abandoned, yet faint music could be heard echoing from inside. One witness, a man named Paul Hargrove, swore he saw people standing on the upper deck like mannequins, not moving, not waving for help, just standing still in the cold. When he tried to approach, his compass spun and his boat's engine stalled. By the time it restarted, the mysterious vessel had vanished into the mist. In April 2000, an oil rig in the North Atlantic picked up something strange on sonar, a large, stationary mass nearly 1,500 meters below the surface. When a remote camera was sent down, it recorded fragments of metal plating matching the Northern Star's design. But the hull appeared twisted, warped as if it had been exposed to extreme pressure or heat. The exploration ended abruptly when the camera feed cut out, and the crew reported hearing faint tapping sounds coming through the sonar channel. The pattern of the taps, when later analyzed, matched the Morse code for 3 simple letters – SOS. What truly deepened the mystery was what happened afterward. In early 2001, the maritime investigation closed officially, citing loss due to structural failure. But 3 months later, another transmission was picked up on an obsolete marine frequency, a weak signal repeating the ship's call sign, November Sierra 9. The problem was, this frequency had been deactivated in 1999. Even more disturbing, the voice on the transmission wasn't new. It matched perfectly with the voice of David Linton, the communications officer who had died months before. Audio engineers confirmed the signal's authenticity. It was broadcast from somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, repeating the same words every 14 minutes. "We can't see the sky. The ship is surrounded." The signal persisted for almost 2 hours before disappearing completely. It was never heard again. A classified report later leaked online suggested that the Northern Star may have encountered a rare atmospheric anomaly, a phenomenon involving geomagnetic fields and infrasound capable of disorienting both humans and equipment. But skeptics argued that no scientific anomaly could explain the voices, the repeated SOS messages, or the identical posthumous transmission. Some theorists believe the ship may have drifted into what sailors for centuries called the Black Fog, a region of oceanic distortion where time and distance behave unnaturally. In 2004, a private deep-sea exploration company called Northline Exploration received permission to conduct a sonar survey of the wreck site. The footage they captured was never publicly released, but one former technician later claimed that what they found was not simply wreckage, it was a ship still intact, its windows glowing faintly in the dark. He said in a recorded interview, it looked like it was still running, like it was alive down there. He refused to speak further and quit his job soon after. Today, more than 20 years later, the Northern Star remains one of maritime history's most unexplained disappearances. Some experts insist it was a catastrophic mechanical failure followed by human error. Others, including several independent researchers, believe something far stranger happened, something connected to the dozens of ships reported missing in the same North Atlantic corridor over the last century. Even now, Coast Guard operators occasionally report faint radio interference on stormy nights, distant voices whispering over static, calling out from a frequency that hasn't existed in decades. And among those voices, a familiar phrase often returns, distorted but unmistakable: "We can't see the sky." Whether those words are remnants of a malfunction, a ghostly echo through the ocean's electromagnetic field, or something else, no one knows. But one thing is certain: somewhere beneath the frozen waves of the North Atlantic, the Northern Star still drifts through the darkness, trapped in an endless transmission, waiting for someone to listen.